I refuse to become a beggar living off welfare for the rest of my life with an old hag like you. I will make sure everything is settled properly. During an unexpected reunion with my ex-husband, who had selfishly demanded a divorce and kicked me out of the house, he claimed he would bill me for all the expenses incurred over the years. Okay, got it. Let's settle everything properly. 2 days after I readily agreed, my ex-husband, who had gone insane, bombarded me with calls. My name is Ashley Morris, a 35-year-old housewife. I met and married Jeff through an arranged marriage when I was quite young, as both my parents had died when I was in high school, leaving me completely alone. No matter how much you manage to live on, it's tough without a family. Although I had an inheritance from my parents and wasn't struggling with money, I had no one to rely on. Ashley, if you'd like, why don't you try an arranged marriage? If you marry a good person, you can help each other and I'll feel at ease. A friend of my mother's, concerned about me, had suggested I participate in arranged meetings. There I met my husband, who said, I just started working and might not be very reliable, but I am serious about you, Ashley. Attracted by his sincerity, we dated for 3 years and eventually got married. However, life wasn't smooth sailing, as we were getting used to married life and considering having children. My father-in-law suffered a severe back injury, and his wife alone couldn't manage. I'm worried, maybe we could live together and I could help? Of course. Filial piety is something you can only do while you're alive. Leave everything about the house to me. Wanting to help my in-laws who treated me like their own daughter, I became a full-time housewife to support them. You're coming home late recently. Is it that hard? Shut up, I'm the one providing for you, so no complaints. However, my husband began spending less time at home, and his attitude towards me turned cold. I wonder what's wrong. Maybe it's getting harder since I became a housewife. But maybe things will get better once your father is well again. Despite feeling insecure, I remained optimistic. But then my father-in-law's illness was discovered, and I had no chance to discuss it with my husband. I'm sorry we've been a burden since we got married. You wanted children, and we've only been a nuisance. My health deteriorated, causing trouble for Ashley. Don't worry too much. I think of you both as my real parents. Let me show my filial piety. I acted cheerfully towards my apologetic in-laws, hoping they would recover as I worked hard on caregiving and household chores. Then, when my father-in-law eventually passed away, and while still in shock, I was told, finally, the dead weight is gone. You're useless now too. What? What are you talking about? I was stunned by these words right after the funeral. My husband then said, I was holding back because of my father, but I don't need you. Who neglected your own husband? You were cold to me, right? Always busy with my father and mother. You are their child, aren't you? Besides, you hardly ever came home, and you never listened to me. That's your fault for not trying hard enough. I don't want to be with someone who has no children with me anymore. I have someone who loves me and a child with her. An old hag like you is just in the way. Divorce me and get out quickly. Already shocked by my father-in-law's death, I couldn't think straight when faced with this devastating revelation from my husband, and ended up divorcing and leaving the in-laws' house with my belongings. There were times I prioritized your parents, but that was something Jeff initially asked for, and he wasn't even coming home. We had decided to put off having children for a while. If you hated it, you should have told me. But whenever I tried to talk, you always got upset. Our marriage was impossible. I had my grievances with my ex-husband, but I didn't regret the divorce. Anyway, I need to find a place to live and a job. Soon after, I found a place to live and was looking for a job. Hey, isn't that Ashley? What are you doing here? While I was looking at job flyers in a store, my ex-husband approached me. Next to him was a young woman holding a baby. I thought, I remember he mentioned something about cheating. So it was true. He even has a child now. How old is this person? During this unexpected reunion with my ex-husband and his shockingly young mistress, I remained silent as he smirked and said, "Well, it's good I caught you. You spent money without permission during my father's caregiving." Huh? Confused and without any recollection, he continued in a domineering tone. "Don't play dumb. After checking Dad's savings, there was less than there should have been. He had a good position and should have had more savings. Isn't it strange? You must have used it since I saw Mom giving you money. You were receiving quite a bit, right? I was managing the household, and the money I received was for shopping on their behalf. I hadn't managed my in-laws' savings, but my ex-husband wasn't convinced. Anyway, I want back the money you cost me during our marriage. I refuse to become a beggar living off welfare for the rest of my life with an old hag like you. I will make sure everything is settled properly." My ex-husband was adamant about getting his money back. "It's your fault for running off with the household money, you know? Make sure you return it." His mistress glared at me and said that. I thought, something about this situation seems off. Feeling a discrepancy in their reactions, but unable to clarify here, I said, "Okay, that's fine. Money matters need careful management. It's not appropriate here and will need documents, right? Let's discuss this in detail next time." I agreed to a discussion proposed by my ex-husband. Good as long as you understand. Don't think you can escape by not wanting to pay. I wouldn't do that. Here, this is my current home address and phone number. Contact me when you're ready. After giving him my contact information, I immediately went home. Then, 2 days later, while I was working, I noticed dozens of missed calls from my ex-husband on my smartphone. I thought, why is he calling this much? As I was puzzled looking at the call history, the phone rang again, so I answered. "Hey, what's going on here? What do you mean?" But my ex-husband was making no sense at all. "Just calm down. What do you need? How can you live there? It's ridiculous." It seemed like he wasn't listening to my voice. "I'm at work right now, so I'll contact you later." After saying this, I hung up and focused on my job. After work, I checked and saw that he had called several times again. Maybe I can read an email more calmly. I sent an email to set up a meeting date with my ex-husband and headed home. He quickly confirmed, and since the next day was a holiday, we arranged to meet at a store. When I arrived, he was already there, and upon seeing me, he burst out, "Hey! What's the meaning of this? What do you mean? Explain it to me calmly." He began to interrogate me in an agitated manner. Once we sat down and I showed readiness to listen, he launched into his tirade. "The address you gave. Isn't that a luxury high-rise apartment? How can you, a housewife, afford to live in such a place? You must have taken your father-in-law's inheritance." "There's no way I would take your father's inheritance. That's my parents' inheritance." I responded calmly to my furious ex-husband. "Your parents' inheritance? But they died a long time ago, didn't they? You said you used it for your school fees. It's true that I used some for school fees, but both of my parents were originally wealthy. And there was quite a lot left, including real estate. I've managed it carefully since it was what my parents left me, and it has grown over time. I had thought my parents were wealthy, but I was surprised to see just how much they had left when I checked the inheritance. This much? They even left land and buildings. With this, there was no problem going to high school. But it's an inheritance left by my parents, so I'll use it carefully. I felt the inheritance was like a memento of my parents. And I learned about asset management and real estate handling thereafter. Even after quitting my job, I managed the assets. I also make use of the real estate I own, and I get a monthly rental income. So now my annual income is about $2 million. That's why living in that high-rise apartment is easy. After you kicked me out, I was looking for a place and a real estate agent friend recommended it. Because it was available. It has good facilities and high security. So I bought an entire floor. It's just right for living leisurely by myself. $2 million. That much. And you bought a high-rise apartment. That alone could build a whole house. My ex-husband was so shocked he froze. But soon recovered and started questioning me accusingly. I didn't hear anything about this. We were married, why didn't you tell me anything? If I knew you had so much money, I wouldn't have cheated. As if he was implying that the cheating was somehow my fault. I sighed in disbelief before explaining. Even between spouses, money can change things. I'd be troubled if you relied on my wealth, and besides, savings from before our marriage are still personal, so it's none of your business. Plus, it's troublesome to be known as rich. It was tough when I inherited my fortune. But I had allies who helped me protect my parents' inheritance. That's when I learned not to speak carelessly about my own wealth. And to be cautious about whom I tell. A friend of my mother's had helped me greatly, had it not been for her. I don't know what would have happened. When she suggested the arranged marriage, she also advised me. Don't disclose the amount of your inheritance or savings. Say an average amount. If you reveal you have money up front, you might end up in a marriage for money. To choose someone who will seriously think about your future. Even if you can trust them, you shouldn't disclose your wealth carelessly. I had heard this from my parents before, but I didn't understand well at the time. Thinking if I won a large lottery, I'd be followed around. But when I grow up, I don't think I'll have that much money. I thought my parents were just being paranoid. But when it was reiterated to me, I truly understood its significance. I thought Aunt was quite wealthy, too. She must have had a hard time. Indeed, she has a good upbringing, but she never flaunted it. I need to be careful about my relationships. Aunt was originally rich. Since becoming successful as an investor, I've become even more cautious. Even when I was attracted to my ex-husband, I thought, he's bright, and being with him makes me feel more alive. He's working hard towards the future, and he's serious, so marriage might work. But he's young, and if I told him about my wealth, he might lose his motivation to work. Even if it doesn't bother him at first, it might eventually. So if I were to tell him, it would be much later. I was still making rational decisions even when excited. I did want to tell you someday. That's why I was observing your actions. To see if it would be safe to tell you. But since we started living together, you did nothing about the house and acted all high and mighty about providing for us. When I thought you were coming home, you were actually cheating. I'm glad I didn't tell you. It's an amount that wouldn't have been necessary in ordinary life. And if we had children, maybe I would have told them because they would have to inherit it. That is. No, if I had known about the money, I would have done the caregiving myself. Supporting 3 people alone was tough. He still seemed to want to blame me, but his argument was unreasonable. Like I said, assets before marriage are none of your business, right? You were the one who said money wouldn't be a problem when we decided to live together because you'd earn enough. It's your parents, so of course, you should help. When we considered living with the in-laws, we thought it would be better if one of us stayed home. You're better at housework, Ashley, so you can take care of the house. I'll work to compensate. I don't mind quitting my job, but there might be times when I'll need your help, Jeff. It'll be tough, but are you okay with that? I'm young and strong, no problem. That was how we decided to live together, but during the divorce, my ex-husband exploded with complaints he had been harboring. Could you not blame me for your cheating? If you had complaints, you should have spoken up. Instead, you reduced your time at home as if running away. You were cold to your own parents. Do you know how sad your father was? How many times had I felt helpless due to my selfish ex-husband? At first, his behavior wasn't overt. I thought, it seems like there's a distance between him and his father. I felt that he had become less attentive to his disabled father than before. I thought, he used to talk proudly about his father. Now, it seems like he's avoiding him. He talks to his mother, but I've never seen him do that with his father. But maybe I'm just overthinking it. However, my ex-husband's behavior changed. I'm tired from work. And yet, you want me to help around the house? Don't you have any intention of letting me rest? What's the point of being a housewife? I didn't mean that. I'm earning to provide for us. Late coming home? It's because I'm working overtime. Don't come complaining at me. He started to lash out at me more often and treated his parents as if they were non-existent, growing colder towards them. I thought, I'm sure he must be tired. Maybe I should prepare some light snacks and soothing items so he can relax at home. I then made an extra effort with my husband's lunches and started being more attentive than before. Thank you for your hard work as always. Here's your lunch. I put in some fried chicken today. What would you like for dinner tonight? While I tried to include his favorite dishes and paid attention to health, he would say, I'll be late, so I don't need it. I'm going to eat with people from work, so I don't need the lunch either. Thus, my husband increasingly ate out. On his days off, he often said he had work and would leave the house. Oh, Jeff isn't here today? Where could he be going, leaving Ashley behind? It's because I hurt my back. I'm sorry to have married you and then caused you nothing but trouble. It's not your fault, Father. He's just busy with work. Despite the change in my husband's attitude, I reassured the worried in-laws that they shouldn't feel guilty. However, my ex-husband's behavior didn't improve, and as his father's health worsened. I haven't seen Jeff lately. Hasn't he come home? No, he does come home, but it's always late at night, after you've gone to sleep, Mother. Is he really coming home that late? I see him less and less lately. Are you managing to spend any time with Jeff? Is he barely home even though he lives in the same house? Does he care about you, Ashley? My mother-in-law was so concerned about our marriage. The truth is, we've been talking less and less, and honestly, our relationship has become quite cold. I hadn't intended to tell my mother-in-law, but perhaps I was at my limit. I had been talking with my husband only about essential matters. I thought, we used to talk and have fun. Now, it seems like he has no interest in family life and is just going through the motions. The more I try to talk to him, the more he ignores me. I had resigned myself to my husband's indifference, but still felt a hint of sadness. I let something slip in conversation. What? That stupid son of mine. You've always been so good to us, Ashley. I'm sorry about our son. My mother-in-law was on my side. Being a full-time housewife, I spent a lot of time at home, and we had grown as close as real parents and child. I thought, the in-laws are so kind to me, but why has Jeff changed so much? He used to be so bright and never cold towards me. I don't feel like I can continue being married to Jeff, but if we divorced, I can't imagine him managing on his own, and I'm worried about the in-laws. I had been considering divorce for years. Both of them apologized to me as if they were sorry for having such a son. Father even worried about me to the very end. You wouldn't know since you were always avoiding him. That is. My ex-husband, perhaps feeling a bit guilty, hesitated in his response. When I knew his father's condition was dire, I approached him. Hey, why don't you also visit your father? You can only show filial piety while he's alive, you know? Huh? Perhaps surprised because I hadn't spoken to him properly recently, I continued. We haven't talked properly lately. The doctor said he doesn't have much time left. I don't want you to have regrets. Although there was hardly any affection left in him, I regretted not being able to show filial piety when my parents passed away suddenly. I don't want Jeff to experience the same. I had agreed to live with the in-laws and become a housewife. They treat me like their own daughter, and I can't just ignore them. I decided to do for them what I wished I could have done for my own parents. Jeff should care about his parents too. And maybe if we got along better in the end, it would bring peace to Father. With a slight hope that Jeff would care, I spoke to him. Unusually for me to initiate conversation. He listened silently but then left the house as if nothing had happened. I thought, it's always about Father's inheritance with him, and he doesn't seem sad. I didn't sense any secret tears at the funeral. I was disappointed that he only seemed to care about the inheritance. I thought he used to be considerate of others, but he's changed. Watching my ex-husband, I realized once more that any expectations of him had disappeared. Before you brought up divorce, I had honestly been considering it too. We hadn't been talking, and there was nothing we did together anymore. The only reason I hadn't divorced was because I was worried about the in-laws. Exhausted, I spoke, and my ex-husband said nothing. I thought, I'm tired of being with this person, and I want to end this conversation quickly. Emotionally charged from my ex-husband's accusations, I too was slightly dragged into it, but regained my composure to address the matter. So, this was about settling things from when we were married? I've been concerned about the money from that time too, so let's get this settled quickly. As I mentioned this, my ex-husband perked up and began. Yeah, that's right. I want you to return the money from when we were married. With a triumphant look, I smiled and presented the documents. Here you go. These are the medical bills for Father's treatment that I covered. And since you cheated, I'd like the compensation for that too, please. What? Explaining to my ex-husband, who looked confused. Your father got a slipped disc, and after he recovered, he got sick again. So the medical expenses were significant. Initially, I used savings. But as the money dwindled, I covered the costs. Of course, the in-laws hadn't asked me to. We didn't have enough money for treatment. I couldn't even talk to Jeff about it. I'm supposed to leave the house management to Ashley. But I thought about working. Is there somewhere I can work? Looking at the passbook and making a difficult face, my mother-in-law had consulted with me. I thought, the in-laws are trying to manage on their own. Even though they aren't very physically strong. Moved by my in-laws, I immediately decided to help. Then I'll pay for it. I have savings from before I was married. And I've been investing that money, so I have a decent amount saved up. I kept silent about the inheritance and told them that. But you are already taking care of us. And we shouldn't trouble her any more than we have to. Plus, what you earned before you married is yours. You don't have to go to such lengths just because you're our daughter-in-law. I think of you, my in-laws, like my real parents. I couldn't do much filial piety for my own parents, so please let me handle this. Really? Then may I rely on you? I will definitely repay you someday. When my father-in-law found out I would cover the costs, he said. Our son isn't reliable, but thank you so much, Ashley. I'll get well soon and repay you for your kindness. He became more motivated for his treatments than before. I've been keeping track of the household expenses. So I've written down the amount I covered. I've kept the receipts too. I didn't think I'd ask to be repaid, but if you're settling up, then please make sure you pay. What? $8,000? Isn't that too much? I've been hospitalized several times, and the medication costs a considerable amount. So it amounts to that much. I've recorded everything, you can see for yourself. Although I mentioned settling things from when we were married, my ex-husband was only thinking about extorting money from me. So when he realized he would be the one paying, he turned pale. And there's also the compensation for the affair. What? We're already divorced, it has nothing to do with you. Since the divorce was recent, I can still claim compensation. I've hired a detective agency to gather evidence of the affair. I haven't received the report yet, but they've told me the affair is certain. After bumping into my ex-husband unexpectedly. To be suspected of taking the inheritance. I have records of the money I used. But it would be troublesome if he screamed and didn't believe my explanation. So I should hire a third party. Thinking this, I had already consulted a detective agency and a lawyer. Why would you do such a thing? It's a matter of money, of course. If you don't like it, you can hire a lawyer too. Though you'll definitely lose. I can't pay that. I have children to take care of. My ex-husband murmured a lie, starting to give off a sense of desperation. It seemed impossible to continue the conversation. You'll have to take responsibility for what you've done. Once the documents are ready, let's talk again. I called out to my ex-husband, though I was not sure he was listening. And then left the store. Later, I visited the in-laws' home with a lawyer. Because I couldn't reach my ex-husband by contact. I thought, you probably wish this never happened, but that won't work. Since nothing was progressing, we decided to make a surprise visit today. When I rang the doorbell, my ex-husband was the one who appeared. What? Why is Ashley here? I told you we'd talk again. I called and emailed but got no response, so I came. I am the lawyer representing her. We have prepared the documents and evidence, so we can settle this quickly. Hearing this, my ex-husband turned pale and suddenly apologized. I'm sorry. Please stop the demand for compensation. I don't have the money to pay. Think an apology is enough? You're the one who had an affair. And I have the right to claim compensation. What? You have plenty of money. It won't matter if I don't pay. You have a legal obligation to pay damages for the affair. It's determined by law. I'm telling you I can't pay. My ex-husband was desperate not to pay, and his voice had become quite loud. What's all this noise about? Attracted by the commotion, my mother-in-law and the mistress, holding a baby, came timidly outside. Oh, isn't that Ashley? Upon noticing me, my mother-in-law exclaimed in surprise and approached. I'm truly sorry. Ashley has been so kind to us. Then she also apologized. Mother, that position is bad for your body. Please sit normally. I hurriedly helped her stand up. Since the mistress looked confused, I explained everything from the beginning. I came here today because he had told me we would settle things from when we were married. I intended to have him pay for the treatment costs I covered, and for compensation for the affair, but he didn't think he would have to pay. I haven't been able to contact him, so I came today. What? You should pay Ashley properly. But I have a child, and if I pay, I won't be able to live. Being scolded by his mother, the reluctant ex-husband was told, you should definitely pay if you had an affair. What? Sarah. Even the mistress began to blame him. You were his previous wife. I'm really sorry. I didn't know, and I apologize for driving you out. Confronted by the mistress who had previously been hostile, I asked to confirm. Didn't you know Jeff was married? I thought he was single because he wasn't wearing a ring. He told me he wanted to get married. I was pregnant while we were dating. I was still in university. Had no parents, and he was the only person I could rely on. We were seriously dating, so when I asked, he agreed to marry me. She took a deep breath, her face contorted as she continued. But after we got married, I heard he was previously married. Women's clothes that weren't his mother's appeared at home, and when I confronted him, he said they belonged to his ex-wife. He explained that he had squandered money, and when he said he wanted a divorce, he was stalked until it finally stopped. I was relieved because he seemed repentant, and I believed him until I met you and glared at you. The mistress looked apologetically at me and continued. But something about what his mother said started to feel off. Jeff would complain about his ex-wife not doing housework. But it seemed to me that he couldn't do it either. At first, I was relieved to marry even though I had no relatives. But now I can no longer trust Jeff. If possible, I'd like a divorce. What? What are you saying? My ex-husband was shocked, but it seemed only natural. I thought, to be lied to by someone you trusted in marriage. It's understandable to become fed up with Jeff, who doesn't seem to want to protect his family. I couldn't help but feel sympathy for the frail mistress. I had learned about her when I investigated the affair. She went to university and lost her parents, somewhat like me. But she didn't have much inheritance, so she had to work multiple part-time jobs. Perhaps she dated Jeff, seeking a stable life. It turns out she was deceived by my ex-husband. It's been a month since I saw my mother-in-law, and she seemed noticeably thinner. I thought, it seems she's been sick with worry since our divorce. And Jeff doesn't seem the type to care for his parents. I was concerned about how my mother-in-law was doing after the divorce. And if the mistress were to divorce as well, she would struggle with a child to raise. Thinking this situation was untenable, I proposed. Why don't you and Sarah come live with me? My house is spacious enough. And it would be perfect if you could come. What? What are you talking about? You be quiet. What do you think? I'm worried about leaving you in such a house, even if it's just temporarily. Ashley is a stranger now, right? Are you planning to abandon your real son and go with her, Mom? Sarah, you're married to me. To this, the two women responded sternly to my ex-husband. A son who dumps everything on Ashley and then cheats isn't a son at all. We don't want a liar. Besides, he doesn't help with the child or anything. He's not reliable as a husband. Leaving the complaining ex-husband behind, we all left the house together. Later, we started living together. I filed for compensation from my ex-husband and also demanded child support payments for the mistress. If I had stayed married, I would have had money and a child. Now I'm swamped in debt. Of course, my ex-husband's savings were not enough to pay, and he would likely be busy repaying debts for a while. As for us, is it really okay for me to be a burden too? I didn't know, but I had an affair. The mistress said apologetically to me, but I reassured her. Jeff is the one at fault. You had a tough time suddenly losing your parents. It was Jeff who took advantage of you. There's a baby involved, let's help each other. And as we lived supporting one another, we became like a real family. I thought, it feels so peaceful. Having a family that can help each other is really wonderful. I strongly felt the desire to protect this life, reminiscent of the security I had when living with my parents. I also decided to donate some of my assets to a non-profit organization that supports people without relatives or single mothers. I had assets and people to help me, but there are many who aren't so lucky and struggle. I hope I can help them a little. It might be self-satisfaction, but I hope that someone in a similar situation to ours can be saved.